For criterion B, defining the product, we're looking at B2, produce a product design specification. So here is our rubric here. To get into the 5 to 6 marks, you've got to provide design specification that explain the requirements for the product with relevant and detailed reference to the research. Okay, just a couple of things. We've got our state, outline, and explain. So make sure you're looking at these command terms, and I've got a couple of examples to kind of go through these. Again, for this section here, it's out of 6 marks, 4 pages, and 1,200 words. So produce a product design specification. For this, you've got to capture both the essential and desirable requirements, ensuring that the redesigned product meets the needs of the intended user. For this, you have got 3 pages. Okay, just a couple of things from the guide. You've got to prioritize the essential and desirable specifications, and you've got to justify them with references to the sources. A specification should capture all the crucial requirements, ensuring that the redesigned product meets the defined success criteria. So you've got all these points here that have to be considered when you're writing your specification. Okay, I would recommend that you use these keywords here when writing your specifications. For example, like weight may come under attributes, and it may also come under safety. So you will have some items that will kind of maybe fall under 2 sections. So as long as they are covered in one of them, that will be okay. So note that this list is not prescriptive or exhaustive. So if there are any additional points that you could factor in, please include them into your specification. So what I always do is I always kind of use a bicycle as an example. So a design specification, first of all, is a success criteria for your product. It lists what the product must and should do in order to meet the user's needs and solve the problem. Okay, that is first of all what a design specification is. It's basically the success criteria for your product. In order for your product to do X, Y, and Z, it needs to have A, B, C. Okay, so if we were to take a bicycle as an example, in order for a bicycle to be successful, it needs to have X, Y, and Z. Okay, so I've broken this up into the essential and desirable parts for a bicycle. So for example, in order for a bicycle to work, in order for it to function properly, it needs to have a frame, wheels, tires, brakes, etc. And then your desirable items would be kind of more along the aesthetics. So you've got your red frame, rubber handle grips, padded seats, etc. Okay, so if we were to just look at this potential IA. So your IA example of this may be redesign stabilizers on a bicycle. Okay, and if we look at an example specification for this, okay, so kind of what a 1 to 2 marker might look like for the attributes. So if I go onto this page here, I've got my attributes here, my spec point, and then these are all the items here that I could consider for the attributes. So what quality should the product have? Should it be lightweight, stable, discrete, adjustable, etc.? Okay, so these are all the items that we could factor in when we're talking about attributes. These are just your question prompts. So I've looked at weight as this item here. So if you've said, I would recommend having this table format here. You can have others, but I personally recommend this one because it breaks up into your spec point, your criteria, whether it's essential or desirable, and you can label these here on your criteria points, and then you've got your justification. So our 1 to 2 marker, our state would be, we've listed our attribute here, we've just said lightweight here, and our justification is so the bicycle is not heavy. That will get you about 1 to 2 marks. Then moving on to our outline, we've got our attributes. The product should be lightweight. Okay, it's slightly more descriptive than previous. And then our justification would be from the client interview, figure 1.1. The user said they do not want the bicycle to feel heavy or harder to control. This means the stabilizers should be lightweight. Okay, so as you can see, that is slightly, you're backing it up with research, slightly more descriptive, and you're kind of slightly justifying it. All right. Now, in order to get into the top band, your 5 to 6 marks, you want to be able to ideally give quantitative data or qualitative data where possible. Okay, so this should all link into research. So our 5 to 6 marks will be the stabilizers should not weigh more than 2 kg, should not add more than 2 kg to the bicycle. So from the client interview, figure 1.1, the user said they want the bicycle to remain easy to control and not feel noticeably heavier. This was also supported by the task analysis, figure 2.1, where balance and control were identified as the key user needs. Product analysis, figure 3.1, of similar bicycle stabilizer products showed that lightweight support systems are more suitable because excessive added mass can negatively affect maneuverability and confidence. Therefore, the redesigned stabilizers should add no more than 2 kg. As you can see, this here is clearly more in depth. Okay, it's got links to 3 different parts of research. They could be both primary and secondary. Ideally, you want to be focusing on more on the primary observations and the primary research as opposed to just using secondary research. You really want your specification to be heavily linked to primary research. Okay, so that would be an example of a top manned.
Hello, elementary school.
So moving on, we've got our specification points here. So the items in yellow are the ones that you have to mention. Okay, they're mentioned in the IB guide and you need to cover these. Okay, here's our items that you should consider. If they're not relevant to your IA, obviously do not use them. The items in blue are just specification points that you could consider as individual points as well. So for example, material, weight, ergonomics, or anthropometrics, and size. Okay, these could also fall into these items here, but you could have them as their own individual point as well. So just looking at the example here, the prosthetics example, this achieved a grade 5 out of 6. So from looking at this, we can see here that it's well presented. It's got a column here for the research. It's got its justifications here. The information is concise. They seem to have covered quite a lot of points, for example, in function here. So it's nicely labeled here. So 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, etc. Interview with client. Your appendix here is not relevant. You should be just putting the synthesis of the information into your IA. The feedback is there are further details suggested for the specification of the bicycle braking system. For example, reference to function in case of change in weather, so rain or humidity, clear quantitative and qualitative data, reference to the range of users' anthropometric data range, as adjustability as suggested in specification requirements 3.2. And also quantitative and qualitative data reference to brake lever shapes and sizes, and further indication of physical and mechanical properties of materials indicating a need for more thorough analysis in criterion A. What you may notice is when you're basically making your point here for your specification, if you're making a point, it has to be backed up with research. Ideally, it should be backed up with primary research. Now, some of the points may need to be just backed up with secondary research. However, you should be trying to back majority of them up with primary research and use quantitative data where possible. So, for example, if you're mentioning weight, using like the words big, small, heavy, light, etc., they should not be in your specification. So you need to be able to give a number, and that should be able to link to the research that you have conducted. You may notice from writing your specification, you may have considered, I haven't actually looked into this, and then you can go back and include that into your criterion A. So you will notice that from going through your specification that you haven't actually got evidence for the point you're trying to make, so you can go back and conduct research so that you can validate your point. So suggestions here for this, I would recommend the layout. First of all, like you really need to focus on the justification. That's what really kind of gets you the mark. So I would remove this column here for the essential and desirable, and you can include that into your criteria point here. Okay, or they could even be on the spec points here. So like there's other ways to include that. This here, the research, I would include that. The research source, I would include that into my justification and just make it bold so that it stands out. Some justifications seem quite vague and could do with being more specific. Yes, so some of the points here, when I'm looking at this particular example, there's only kind of one quantitative piece of data here. So I would like to think that that there would be an opportunity here for more quantitative data for this particular example. I do feel that this got a grade 5. Personally, I think that's quite generous. I think this is more of a 4 to 6 example if I was grading it. The wheelchair disability desk, this got a grade 3. The student compiled a list of non-prioritized specifications with some connection to the product analysis and empathy with the user. So they have ordered it here, which is good. So to improve, the student could have related the specifications more specifically to research. Again, that will be focused on the quantitative and qualitative data. For instance, students could have addressed questions such as how much weight should the table support, quantitative data opportunity missed there, why is mobility important for the table, how can the table promote good posture, what anthropometric and biomechanical factors are crucial. Okay, so as you can see, there are points that the student should have factored in. Having images here, like these text items here, they're not legible, so the moderator isn't going to really look at those. Again, having the image in here, does it really help with the justification? So your justification here should be just highlighting that this image here should be somewhere else in the research in your criterion A. It is also noted that manufacturing aspects are not pertinent at this stage. Furthermore, the specification seems to focus solely on a table for work, overlooking other potential functions such as the issues around eating and drinking. So as you can see here, just like a quick scan of it, we can see here that there's very, very little quantitative data for this example here. Again, the links to research, I can't really see it here as well. So it's important to just highlight that, make it easy for the moderator when they're grading it. Make it in bold, make it in a different color, underline it, whatever it is, so that they can see that you're linking it back to your criterion A. Looking at this example here, the math playset, I personally wouldn't recommend this layout. This did achieve grade 4. Again, I feel that is quite generous. There was room for improvement in providing a detailed explanation, particularly through the task analysis. Okay, so you haven't actually there isn't really a justification here for this. So I do feel that this should have perhaps got a grade 3 as opposed to a 4. Got the test and method here, but that should be included in the justification ideally. You can see lots of secondary research here used and citations. You really want to avoid doing that. You should be mainly focusing on the primary research that you have conducted, or the primary observations. Secondary is kind of last case scenario that you should be using. Specifications seem to hint at a predetermined outcome, which could limit creativity and innovation. Enhancing the explanation of requirements by referencing task performance analysis would have provided a clear understanding of the design specification. So moving on to the trowel example here. Before we read the feedback, let's look here. Okay, we've got 3 bits of quantitative data. That looks good. Here, again, the site here, this could be included into the justification here. It doesn't actually really say, it just says qualitative data collected through measurements of various gardening trowels. Okay, but what task was this? Like, what figure does this relate to? This could be definitely cited better in the justification. So, link it to criterion A1 or figure 2.1 or whatever it is. Okay, so that links back so that moderator can clearly see the link between your justification and where you got that information. So for this one here, there were some discrepancies with the details between the specification and the criteria provided. For example, references to boarding houses and the aesthetics and style were not adequately supported by criterion A. Essentially, if you do not do adequate research in criterion A, you will not be able to write a substantial criterion a specification for your criterion B. So it is very important that in criterion A, you do the groundwork, you lay the foundation so that you can build the blocks for your specification so that it can be detailed. If you haven't done a good criterion A, it's impossible to score well in for B2 for your specification because you have not done the research. To enhance this aspect, the student should aim for a more complete specification expressed in full sentences to provide clear guidance for the product development process. Okay, as you can see, the example that I went through previously, the bicycle example, that's what that refers to as well. And lastly, looking at the FPV drone racing tool, we can see here we've got some measurements here. That's good. So that kind of shows that they're factoring in, they've got a better idea of what they're looking at. This here got grade 4. Although the student included a list of essential tools, there was confusion about their combined weight and footprint when laid out, and the origin of the decisions regarding dimensions and weight wasn't clear. Additionally, there was confusion surrounding the use of the fifth percentile, as not sure where the dimensions were established. Improving clarity and providing a more definitive link between specifications and user needs through task analysis would enhance the effectiveness of this aspect. Now, they have done the priority here, which is good. However, the justifications really just need to link back to where they have done the research. So target market there, you could do it in that format there so that you're labeling where the information, where you got the information for your point that you're justifying essentially. And that is it for specification B2.